everyone, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Behind the Map. Today, I'm chatting with Wes Jones, a principal GIS engineer at Esri. Wes is a cartographer on the Living Atlas team at Esri, where he's worked since 2009. He's an author and an illustrator, and he has contributed to several published children's books that focus on cartography and maps. It's great to talk to you today, Wes. Can you talk a little bit more about your interest in mapping and how you got started?
Yeah, for sure. And thank you so much, Robbie, for inviting me to this podcast. Well, I guess how I got interested in mapping, it's one of those things where it probably was, it was a lifelong interest. However, it's one of those things, looking back, I didn't realize it was a lifelong interest. It's one of those funny things, I didn't even realize you could have a career doing maps. So I'll just give two quick examples there where on road trips, I would have the road map in my hand the entire time. And that was basically, no one asked me for directions, I just wanted it in my hand. And then the other one was my mom was really nice. She let me paint on my wall. And so I painted this whole world map on my wall with all the cities, over 1 million people, with all the biomes. It was lost in a plumbing accident. But so the signs were there, but I just didn't really realize. And so what happened after high school, I meandered through university a little bit, ended up taking geography and history, took some time off, and then finally specialized in mapping. Went to school at the school in Nova Scotia called COGS. And that's where I really started honing in this interest in maps. Took a job just before I came to Esri, and then I've been at Esri ever since. So it's a quick blast through of sort of this meandering path to maps.
So you had this passion for mapping for a long time, and I'm so sorry to hear about the mural and the wall painting. That sounds like that would have been so cool to see. How does that passion carry through to the work you do at Esri?
Well, obviously, since I do have that passion and I work on maps every day, it's a direct correlation. But maybe more specifically, because my path in school and maybe life to a degree wasn't super linear, in school I took a lot of different classes because I kind of have this eclectic group of interest. And so, like, even behind me, I think you can see my curling brims. Like, I've got different sport interests as well. And so I think what happens is maps somewhat ties all that stuff together. And so I'll make fun maps or technical, print, a ton of different topics. So I think that's probably what it is. It's maps sort of tie everything together.
I love that idea. You are kind of renowned for taking a very hands-on, almost deliberately manual approach to your mapping projects. Why is that? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think everyone needs to find what works for them. And for me, doing that hands-on manual stuff is kind of what I like the most. I think I can express myself the best when I do that manual or hand-drawn or drawn approach. And I think maybe this works out well for me is those skills that sometimes takes a while to develop, like drawing, are the ones I like the most. I find those the most fulfilling ones that take a lot of time. And then after a long time, you see the results. So it fits with me quite well. And then I guess it ties into, like, even with others, I like seeing that expertise and craftsmanship. So whether it's architecture or music or woodworking or other maps, that's sort of what I like to see, and I'm drawn to in others as well. And then I guess another thing too, as I was trying to find what I want to do in life, sometimes knowing the opposite is useful too. And so, and even currently, like, I'm not really interested in generative AI mapping. That aspect is not really for me, but I do realize that computers are fantastic. And so finding that balance, like, I like drawing on paper with a pencil. That's my favorite, but I can't paint very well and I can't do much with brushes. And so going to the computer and doing the coloring digitally is this nice balance for me. So yeah, the handcrafted approach is, I just find that it adds something extra to the maps, and that's where I can express myself.
And I think that really kind of aligns to something we've talked about before, which is this idea about there should be a human element in mapping, right? Like, thanks to GIS and thanks to other computer mapping programs, it's really easier than ever before to create a map. But you really have this kind of belief that, and it's kind of a core principle, that humans should be present in maps. So can you talk a little bit more about what that means to you? Like, why do you think the human element is important in mapping, and what does that look like?
Well, I could probably talk about this topic quite long, and so we'll see where it goes. But so Cartography is funny because it's at this crossroads. It's clearly art, but it's also clearly technical. And it's because it's so much science based. And so like it plays this little tug of war, but like it's probably impacted by technology more than a lot of other arts. I think it's because it's historically been very hard to do. And now it's gotten easier, but you're dealing with like sometimes worldwide data sets. So the data is humongous. But then you have to be accurate on top of it. So the technology is always asking for an optimization somewhere, usually an efficiency. And but since cartography is part of the arts, it I think it asks for a human element, since humans make art. And so you've got that tug of war between artistry and technology a little bit. And sometimes they're on the same side. Sometimes the tech says, actually, I can allow you to be more artistic. And sometimes it changes and you can be less artistic. And then with maps, some of them actually want to be more technical and you don't need as much artistry in them. And then some need more of it. So I guess on balance, I'm more interested in the human craftsmanship side of it. And maybe I can talk, well, since AI is the tech coming, maybe I'll talk about that for a second. Coming slash here versus what is it? Who knows? But and I don't want to debate about like legal stuff, attribution, ethics, whatever. That's not the point. I'm looking specifically at the creation and maybe even generative maps, that part of it. And because it's obviously coming. And I've been thinking about this. I'm wondering how much of the current workflow will be replaced by that. I'm hoping just small aspects because I do think, again, I'm drawn to that human side of it. And I'm going to give an analogy. I've been thinking about this one for a while, and I love analogies because analogies are helpful, but they also, you can nitpick them and they don't work when you start nitpicking. So I kind of like that aspect of analogies. But let's look at how some technologies can coexist with one another. So I'll look at writing. And when we're young, we learn to print. That's usually how you start. And then historically, you go to cursive. Though that's starting to change in North America. I'm not sure if that's changing elsewhere, but that's historically would be the next step. And then for efficiency, you learn to type. And then more recently, let's just look at four modes. Then you've got speech to type. Now, do we need all four of these? They basically do the same thing, but I think they can coexist and they do coexist quite nicely. And they have different use cases. And maybe this generative mapping is more like speech to text in this example. And maybe how we currently make maps is more like typing. And I think those two work well together. My hope is that it's not like cursive, where we see it as a replacement. And interestingly, with cursive, I find it's the way you can actually express those letters the most interestingly and the most you. And so that's just a side. That's, I guess, separate to the analogy, but I find that interesting with cursive. That's the one we're pushing away a little bit. But with every tech, you gain something and you lose something. And with whatever AI is, you're obviously gaining speed and efficiency, but you're probably losing a human element to a degree. I'll give you a mapping example of this. Let's look at how you display relief on a map. You can use contours, you can use hashes, or you can, commonly use shadows. So you'll make a hill shade or shaded relief. And historically, because that's where the tech was, you would hand draw it. And it required like an immense amount of time and expertise. And we came along and we developed these digital models because it's faster, it's more accurate, you can do more with it. But there's something really neat about a hand-drawn shaded relief. So much so that there's now digital models that are trying to make it look like hand-drawn shaded relief. But I think there's something to be learned from people, like a generational thing, people who did in the past. And so I really enjoy the hand-drawn shaded relief, and especially the uniqueness of each person's. And so I sought out this gentleman. He just passed away, but Herwig Schutzler. And I was able to interview him a couple of times, and I trained under him just a little bit. And I learned a tremendous amount. That's something you can only learn from someone who's done it for a lifetime. And so I'm developing those skills. And to your point, that it really means a lot to me, being able to add a little bit of myself to the map through that handcrafted way. So hoping to develop those and then pass those along. So that's sort of my ramblings about the human element of mapping.
So kind of building off this idea of like really seeing yourself in maps and getting involved. I know that there's two areas of your work that you're also kind of well known for outside of maybe your more formal cartography. So I'd like to touch on both of them. And I think they both relate to your core ethic as a map maker. So really curious to kind of get your thoughts here. So one is you have experience doing and creating maps for children and for children's books. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the projects you've worked on and how you approach making a map that's geared towards children. Like is it a different process building a map for that kind of purpose than something you would build in your kind of day-to-day role at Esri?
Yeah, I like this transition because it's like technical thing, and then you go over to like children's maps, which has their own technicality, but that's how I am at work. I kind of switch hats all the time. So I really do like working on kids' projects. I was going meandering through life. I ended up working at a daycare for a while, and teaching is something I did consider at one point. If I didn't do cartography, it probably would have been teaching. And so the two main projects I've worked on recently, like, off the top of my head, are I did a children's multi-scale base map, and I've also illustrated and done some activities in this kids book called The Locators. There's two versions. There's Locators Adventure in South America, and then Locators Adventure in Oceania. And there you've got these kids trying to solve geographic problems. We're currently working on a third right now that's with Kyle Bauer and Colleen Connor. And then, because I do a lot of technical stuff, but I do like doing other things. So I find after a little bit, I do need to get into more of a kids map realm. So I'll do things like I'll try to cartoonize a map, or I'll do silly things like add surfers to a map. But to answer your question, I think, like, so how do I make them for kids? I think I always keep the idea of fun needs to be one of the core elements. That's what I like generally in maps anyway, so it's not too much of a stretch for me. And I find if I like the map and I find it fun, typically I'm in the right direction. But it's probably more than just fun. It probably is tying it to an interesting topic or activity. And what I think about these maps, I never like thinking of like dumbing down something for kids. I like the term I like better is simplifying, because I actually find kids sometimes see it way more pure and more interestingly than an adult sees it. They don't have maybe as many biases. So sometimes you have to make the activities a little bit simpler. And then I think this is key for being successful at it, is get feedback from kids. So my kids give me a tremendous amount of feedback. They're always like, hey, that looks weird, or that doesn't work. And then with that Locators book, I actually sent it out to quite a few kids just to get their feedback to see if these activities made sense. And so, yeah, those are things fun and definitely get kid feedback.
So kind of shifting gears and related, you also have a passion for fantasy mapping. So what does fantasy mapping mean to you? Because we've definitely written about a couple different fantasy maps on the website over time. And do you think your work on fantasy mapping has made you a better cartographer?
Yeah, fantasy mapping is definitely one of my joys in life, and it goes back a lot. This one, it's funny how, like, mapping, I wasn't sure the path. Fantasy mapping, I always knew was there, because even from, I think my mom saved my artwork pretty well. So I've looked back, and when I was 6, I was drawing fantasy maps, and like I drew a Dr. Seuss kind of map. And then the one that impacted me, like so many others, was The Hobbit. I looked at that map. I can't tell you for how long, like years before I ever read the book. So the map was actually the thing that interested me, and not so much the book. And so fantasy maps it just combines what I like to do in drawing, and I guess mapping. It kind of works perfectly for me. And I guess I've done it for so long, and this ties into that teaching side of me, I guess, where I thought at one point, I was like, hey, I think I can teach people how to draw these maps. And so on the side, one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done actually is I've put together 2 books, fantasy mapping books, and how to draw. One's fantasy mapping, drawing worlds, and the other is drawing kingdoms. And it's just different scales of the map, basically. And so, yeah, that's been one. And I'm working in a few others actually, but that's one of my favorite things I've ever done. But to answer your question, how has it made me a better cartographer? this one is almost in every way, actually. It's made me a better teacher, even how I teach cartography. Drawer, obviously, and I can bring those drawings into the maps I do here. Graphic designer, typography, definitely color theory. It's probably one of the areas that's helped me the most because you got to make the colors look good on that fantasy map. And colors are tricky, and drawing that into the real world projects definitely improved. And I would say even like learning how this is more behind the scenes, but just how to organize projects, it's really helped me. Like going through a book project. Now, okay, I can take that what I've learned and do that here, and that's been fantastic. Um, I'll say this actually. Sometimes you can, because it's an imaginary world, you can do more things. And if something's really interesting there, I sometimes do bring that over to the real world geography where it's a little bit more rigid. And so like a coastline treatment or something like that. But hobbies will always have a positive influence on your day to day. That's just, in my opinion, the reality of it. So yeah, they've definitely helped me be a better cartographer.
Along those lines, you've taken a very kind of interesting path to get to where you are. So what advice would you have for someone else who wanted to get interested in a career like the one you've had?
Thought about this a lot actually, because it is unique to each individual, but I'll say some points and then reiterate at the end, but it is a journey and it's your journey. Everyone has their own unique one. But say they wanted to get into something, and I'll tie some of these comments to cartography, but like you do need to hone your skills. And I think the easiest and most effective way to do that is just to create a lot. Volume really matters. The more maps you do, it's just you're naturally going to get better at them. And then I think having a consistency, if you really want that thing, if you say it's 3 times a week, you work on it 3 times a week. It really does make a difference. And as far as like the field of cartography, if you can learn all those things like art theory, graphic design principles, typography, uh, it's just going to go a long way. But I would also say like study old maps and study great maps, even maps outside of your style. See if you can recreate them yourself. That's very useful. So project-based learning, I'm a strong believer in. But I'll put a caveat here because I mean, some of these I've learned, I'm still learning, but I made a web comic at one point and it was a great project, but it was a 3 year long project and that's all I did. And it was way too long a project. I got it done, but I recommend if you're going to do projects, maybe make them smaller and cap them at a month. And I think again, to that volume side of things, that will really help. For cartography skills directly, you're going to have to learn them somewhere. Now, school's an option. I think just make sure if you go to school, you balance between the theory and the practical, because cartography kind of does get split a little bit that way. You can always find a mentor, and you can have more than one mentor. Someone can mentor you on hillshade, and someone can mentor you on something else on the art side or whatever. And then you can learn on the job or on your own time. There's just so many resources out there. And I'll say this thing, actually, this is one where I've thought about a lot, is about how do you get feedback on your map in your works? And I would say at first, be careful getting feedback, because if I showed my early stuff, uh, it might I would have found actually quite demoralizing, I think, some of the feedback. So there's such thing as good and bad feedback. So only give it to people who will give you good feed. And that doesn't mean positive, it just means good feedback. I think that's really important, especially if you're starting. But it's scary and it's exciting because it is on you, but it's a journey and I'm learning something every day, just like everyone else is learning something every day. So yeah, that's sort of a ramblings of some of the advice I would give.
Well, I think this was a wonderful conversation. There's some really great like nuggets of wisdom here that I really hope people will hear and will apply to their own work. So thank you so much for spending the time with me today, Wes. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you. It was great.